from the Lucid Fringe. Ravings from the Lucid Fringe. Musings from an unpasteurized life. Improvised on the front line of love and beauty. Welcome, I'm Semeric Yarrow. This week on Ravings from the Lucid Fringe, Story Walking, Life Dimensions number 6, Powered by the Past. It's everywhere like a thick layer of dust obscuring the present. We walk through it when we walk down a street, whether it's past buildings that have a history, or the flowers we haven't seen since last week, or the spaces we move through that held other energies that have gone. Slipping through our fingers, inevitably, and often the clearest sign of time's erosions, of the past, where things pass to in their constant passing. Chish and Phipps. My friend Matt had recently told his son that this was the name of a shop opposite our primary school 40 years ago, and days earlier I had passed it, and it was still there and still had the same name. Two different stories from the past, coming together in our time together back in July, which was a sharing of many, many other stories, interpretations, gatherings of moments in time that we've been apart. 16 years and more, in fact, since we last gathered for a cup of tea in the rain. That, in itself, is another moment, half remembered, half invented, perhaps, if you take the Mandela effect as an example. I saw the great man on the cricket pitch at Newlands in 1996. Some people genuinely have memories of hearing that he'd died in prison in the 80s, so many that scientists are a little perplexed. Some time around when my own grandfather passed away in the Eastern Cape, perhaps. Matrix glitches pop up from time to time to throw us off course. So if we're going to look into the personal past and the shared past, we have to start with an awareness that there are many fractal parts of consciousness involved, of which I'm just one, with my memories popping up at unexpected times from unplanned prompts. Part of the memory game. Personal memories laced with déjà vu. As I meandered recently through the streets of our childhood, things came back to me. At the same time I recalled streets fitting together slightly differently. It took a while for familiarity to return. Moments in time where names were called out, where balls hit bats. Matt reminded me that we'd once collected cricket stickers, an idle fact that meant more to him, clearly, than to me. Still, it was pleasurable to be reminded, which is a quite different process to actively remembering. Someone's doing the work for you. I had plenty of this recently with faces that were part of my distant past. I myself remembered ducks on the ponds, the smells of a friend's staircase. And I visited briefly the house I grew up in that formed part of my dreaming life for so many decades after we'd sold it. My daughter saw it too. A different experience for her, a first-time present experience, but still one of inquiry. The same ceiling fittings, the holly bush beside the garden path, the decorated tiles around the fireplace, the double doors in the hallway with their decoration once uncovered by my father. Uncovered because they were antique, and the family there before us had no interest in the past, so in the funky, forward-looking 1960s they boarded up the glass. There's a restlessness about that decade that, 60 years later, we can put in museums with such irony. The past is what builds the richness of our sense of ourselves, our way of sharing with each other, and its primary mode is story. History, which is not at all the same thing as truth, though it has a delicate dance to do with it and needs to echo with our own time. Countries, or at least the rulers of states, have consistently aimed to use their pasts for telling versions of stories that they think are useful. Fascism was literally born out of nostalgia for an imagined version of ancient Rome. In Afghanistan, the 11th century Sultan Mahmud is a national hero to many, even though unlocking the puzzle shows a multifaceted warlord fighting brilliantly, brutally and pragmatically against those who didn't share the caliph's religion, sleeping with his male slave and getting in trouble with his wife, getting drunk frequently and appreciating poets a little along the way. So there's some similarities to and some big differences from the average Taliban leader today. Such, I learned yesterday, from reading Drinking Arak Off an Ayatollah's Beard, a wonderful dive into the past by a recent traveller in the Persian-speaking lands. The interesting thing about reading is also the mystery it represents. We aren't there when the author rubs things out, adds extra pieces. The process of editing is usually very difficult to dig up, even by the most expert archivist. Part of me has always viewed the past as a puzzle to be figured out, particularly when it concerns an aspect of the global story rather than just what you may have had for breakfast, fascinating though that can be in itself as an example of cause and consequence. History is a place of perfection in this puzzle version, when those crumbling walls of churches and mosques and castles were completed, finished, magnificent. Already past tense, before the buildings were used and abused by the flesh and blood beings that have long gone. Those perfect moments are deadly because they hold us in their narrative control. The moments when there was no turning back from the next cycle of conquest, for example, when our hearts might rebel, insisting there were other choices that the glossy surface narratives don't want us to notice. It's even more obvious when we get to archaeology. Narratives are created that show the foibles of our own time, grooves of possibility when the answers might lie well outside of our latter-day paradigms, hidden in unseen layers, next to fossils of ancient aliens or whatever else our sleuthing hasn't got anywhere near noticing. Djenné in Mali shows evidence of 1,000 years of peaceful, non-hierarchical living, which is known about, but isn't usually told because, honestly, peace makes for a boring story. Once upon a time, they all lived happily ever after. It's worth exploring how much our quest for challenging story affects our present-day fate. Because the past is ultimately a pretty infinite thing, stretching behind us to the vanished horizon, a blank canvas for all the fractal old masters hiding underneath. How do we stay open to what might actually have happened? For me, though, the biggest question about the narratives we choose are, how is believing this really helping empower me and us? Whether the story is personal or supranational, it builds a picture of what it is to be human. We can other the past like we other modern cultures and people. Or we can reach out and try and see who they were, in what ways they felt the same as us, in what ways they were more connected to, or disconnected from, the landscape in which they related. This reaching into the other really is the valuable task we have when reaching into history, but also actually when reaching into story more generally. The less linear, more imaginative kinds of story are their own versions of pasts, helping us make deeper sense. Some cultures, indeed, have privileged myth heavily over literal truth when telling histories. Epics poured out in a cultural time where we spoke much more than we wrote, and learning lines was second nature. The memory retention of an actor in Shakespeare's day, or a court minstrel telling a next instalment, or the monks who used powerful visualization mnemonics to remember the whole Bible, or just possibly remember Roger Bacon's works that ran to over 1 million words. Allegedly, one monk carried these across Europe in his head to report them to the Pope, but that's probably legend. This all speaks of another level of memory use we have not exercised properly for a while. In India, the Rig Veda was only written down by those pesky Brits. Previously, all 10,000 verses were handed down perfectly from Father Brahmin to son, because oral transmission was more valued. This does, however, show us more of the omissions involved in writing. The Indus Valley civilization had a script we can't decipher, solely for trade transactions. I have no doubt that holy scriptures and stories were passed down there as oral memory like the Rig Veda. So when we rely on the elegant untruths of writing, which declare that so-and-so had always owned this land or bought it freely from that tribe, we should know it's usually a powerful fudging of the truth, designed as a slice of the past, curated for posterity by those who controlled writing. Whereas the deeper past remains in our cells, with our ancestral inheritance, and that's also where our memories dance. So what do those genetic ancestors have to teach us? Some of us reject all our ancestors, fleeing the dreadful past as the 60s did after the horrors of the war and the shiny denial of the 50s. We want to put the past behind us and never turn around. However, when we delve into those stories, there's undoubtedly gold there for us. For a start, whether they were gentlefolk going with the flow or vicious bastards causing divisions, our direct ancestors were survivors, or we wouldn't be here. So there's also power flowing there. Who knows which ancestors became gods of lost religions, or which of us might be seen as such by future ones. The danger is that in turning to our own younger selves, our own ancestors, we would get trapped in one groove of a story, which is only one way of telling it, of seeing it. There are actually two stronger ways to play with the past. One is to step backwards, because of course it is backwards where we can choose to feel the strength of our ancestors behind us, supporting us in going on, rather than holding us with tight cords to the ghosts. The weight of the past is a story heard in too many therapists' rooms. In entering the territory of the ancestors, stepping physically back and embodying their energies, we could hear stories we'd never heard before. Some of them hold power that could really do with unleashing themselves. Hearing an old-time Afrikaner bursting forth with energy at a Tswana ritual was quite a mind-expanding moment for me. If we're ready, taking on this energy into our movement and working with it into our dance can feel like we're making the world turn a little bit more. We can go far back, of course, connecting with, acknowledging and recognizing our ancient mammal origins, feeling our relationships with all things through the tendrils of genealogy. The second way is to consciously turn around to face the ancestors at our back, to imagine them in front of us and to stay quietly open to what they may bring rather than the stories about the past that already hold us. Then we allow surprising things to be sounded into our minds. The deep past is a mystery, but many traditions have understood that with the right level of reverence and ceremony, bits of it can emerge that can support our own journey. And if bringing it into the space is important, it lives in our body, in our cells, as psychologist Bessel van der Kolk says. If we don't work with it consciously, often it will emerge when we least expect, and that can be traumatic. Some of our personal past plays out mostly in our minds. It can still be good to embody these tales, to bring them out of the darkness, to make them fuller. I was for a while a part of a playback theatre company whose task was to improvise true stories told by audience members. Often these theatrical versions of the past both gave a truth that the teller recognized, and through image, music, shapes, emotions, movements, costumes, the actors provided a different way of seeing the story. The story got shared so that the teller got seen, but they also got a different version of events to what they'd shared, even if it was just a brief glimpse into another aspect of the tale. Magic emerged there, breaking the hard grooves, and an embryonic community was formed in the listening. This was always the purpose of story, of course. The very act of feeling into our past and sharing our stories is a crucial way for other people to get over their own stories of who you might be, their own conjectures about your history, and instead hear your version. Though at the same time, stories contain forks in the road. What-ifs are the conjectures that link us to other dimensional realities where one butterfly wing tweaked things differently. And in gradually understanding the cause and effect mechanism of our past, we can of course try to choose differently. Not always easy, shifting out of those grooves. The causal chains are often just that, showing us the interconnectedness of all things, which is beautiful, and the difficulty of doing anything new. This might seem counterintuitive in an epoch where computer memory is doubling so fast and large language models are able to sweep through our collective memories, at least the ones it can find on the internet, which is, in my opinion, a minuscule part of human culture, masquerading as a great one. AI can't, of course, generate anything truly new, though often neither do we, of course. That bright thought you had was likely begat elsewhere in the collective ether. In fact, social grooves are created by the past, in the same way we deliberately make recordings. Those vinyl grooves laid down the one and only tune that record would preserve. We are not made of such hard plastic, but if we don't bring light to these grooves, they'll suck us in, and we'll find ourselves acting out our parents once more. Generations of ancestors did this, no doubt. Only now do we try to be individuals that can break free of the path laid down for us by grandfather. Paradoxically, at the same time, we are recording more than we ever have. Mozart got to improvise without fear of ever being captured on record. Yet the truths in the body can allow us to break freer, remembering our pre-literate, prehistoric ancestors. That's most of human history. Dancers, fire makers, storytellers, gatherers, medicine people, sometimes hunters. Those stories are never going to be found in written form. No Tacitus was there writing the annals of the creators of Stonehenge. Our access to these pasts must be imaginative and magical. And the eons they call up might, of course, have something to say to us. We pore over Mayan glyphs quite as much as over John's Apocalypse to see what those in the ancient past had to say about our coming future, in these times when ages are turning. Perhaps more useful is our own looking back at our waking day, sometimes in reverse. Carlos Castaneda would have us dive deep into our memories in the dark to find who in our past we need to resolve knots with. Hundreds of people, of memories from our years of life. That in itself is a crazy, wild epic that will probably reveal plenty of cracks in the matrix along the way, but also free up that trapped past energy for where it's really useful, here and now. Playing with the past is, in fact, a valuable daily habit, and stories are one of the most human things there is. There was once. More than completing puzzles, perhaps the best way to look into the past from the present is to find patterns. Stories have the seductive habit of pulling us from one event to the next, and we can easily miss the bigger pictures. Context is as essential as text, as many a literary theorist could probably yawningly tell us. Repeating patterns are the essential entrails for us to examine, that help us launch into the future with a little more solidity to the rudder. The stern that keeps things solid as we point the bow forward. We know we're in a mess, and we need more than cautionary tales, it seems. So let's explore the past like time travellers, treading across the imagined centuries with our listening footsteps, and find the genuine heroines and heroes, often well outside the canons and the canons, far beyond the distracting false stories of our time, and closer to the truths we know are possible. So, thank you for listening to this latest episode in the series, and you can find all of my articles and my recordings at lucidfringe.substack.com, except my music and poetry from the past, which is all available at simrickyarrow, all one word, .bandcamp.com. And the background recordings and sounds that you will have heard are all either from those recordings or they are my own. Please do give this a rating if it's on your podcast app. Please spread the word if you enjoy what you hear. And if you want to give me some feedback or commentary, of course, I'm very open to that. Any suggestions for future episodes? Okay, enjoy. See you next time. Ravings from the Lucid Fringe. Ravings from the Lucid Fringe. Musings from an unpasteurized life. Improvised on the front line of love and